Right. I think there are too many people for us to go into the courtyard. It would burst at the seams. But just have a look through the doorway and you're welcome to take a photo. But it is haunted, so neither I nor the City Council can be responsible if you do venture in there. It's a very old building, as you can see. It's an old medieval courtyard house. Those of you who are taking notes, medieval courtyard house. So it was built about perhaps 600 years ago. And originally there would have been one family living in this house, and the home accommodation would have been at the back, on the other side of the courtyard. And on this side of the courtyard there would have been stables perhaps on this side, and on that side there would have been a guard room. And they would have employed a man or two men, perhaps retired soldiers, to guard the property and guard the family. So that was where the guard room was. His job would have been to make sure that only the right people came through this little doorway. This door is very old as well. Have you noticed it? Its date is 1590. So it's an Elizabethan. Our first Queen Elizabeth was on the throne when this door was put here. There's another very similar door going into the Guildhall. If you've been in the Guildhall, you will see that. It's very similar. In fact, the experts say it may well have been made by the same carpenter because it is so similar. And can you see across the top, there's some very fierce faces. Here's a lion. Here's a very fierce-looking lady. There's another lion there. And these figures would have been put there to keep away the evil spirits. Okay. So we should be quite safe, shouldn't we? However, there was a sighting of a ghost here a few years ago. Where was the lady from Exeter? Do you remember Bishop Westall? No, Bishop Westall was Bishop of Crediton, and he lived in the house at the back there. And I knew him myself. He was a very nice gentleman with a delightful wife, and he had a niece. And one day his niece, the niece of these two people, came to stay in Exeter. And she knew a lot of people in Exeter, so she met up with her friends. She would have been a young girl of 16, 17, 18, something like that, teenager. Well, one summer evening, she went out and met her friends, and she was coming back across the close just as it was getting dark. And she walked across that tarmac path that you can see there. And as she walked across the path to come back to her aunt and uncle's house here, she suddenly had that feeling that she was being followed. So she turned and had a look. And yes, there were two men behind her, so she was a little bit nervous and she walked a bit more quickly. She turned again and looked, and she suddenly realized they were no ordinary men. They had hats with huge feathers in, they had ruffs round their necks, they had leather jerkins, they had ballooning trousers, long boots and swords at their waist. In other words, Elizabethan, we would say, of our first Queen Elizabeth, Elizabethan soldiers. So she was terrified. She came rushing along here. She came in through this doorway. Her aunt was tending some plants in pots in the courtyard there with her dog, a little Pekingese. So the girl came flying through here and she said, "Oh, aunt, I'm being followed by some strange men." Well, you would, wouldn't you? Terrified. So the aunt came forward. The dog nearly went mad. Its hackles came up, its hair stood on end, it snarled, it barked, it came rushing out as if to attack these two men who walked in through this doorway and disappeared through the wall on the left. It's a blank wall, and they went straight through it. So that is how we found out that that room was originally a guard room, because this was reported to the archaeologists in the museum, to the people in the museum, and they said, well, the original plans of the house, that would have been a guard room. So probably this was the spirits, these were the two spirits of the two men who had been a guard at the house years ago. And I believe they've been seen once or twice since, but that's the sighting that I know about in detail. So have a little look through the archway before we move on. Take some pictures. I don't think we ought to go in because there are too many of us. It is now the home of two people. The dean of the cathedral lives at the back, and the director of the cathedral music, Mr. Millington, lives on the right. So there are two families who live here now, so I think we should not go in. But do have a look through the door. And could the last person kindly pull the door to behind you? The last person to look. Could you remember to do that for me, please? Thank you. You're going to move in that.